Rain plummeted from the charcoal-gray sky of Mizudafu, Japan, turning the ruined asphalt of the intersection into a slick, treacherous mirror. Sirens wailed in the distance, a haunting symphony that had become all too familiar to the pro-heroes and students of UA High School. But right now, the sirens were background noise. All that mattered was the erratic, gasping breaths of the villain standing at the epicenter of the destruction, and the blinding, jagged rifts in reality he was tearing open with his bare hands. Izuku Midoriya wiped a mixture of rainwater and blood from his cheek, his emerald eyes locked onto the target. The villain, a desperation-driven man whose quirk allowed him to fracture and fold space like origami, was cornered. And cornered villains were always the most dangerous. Kaken! On your left! Izuku shouted over the roar of a collapsing storefront. Katsuki Bakugo didn't need the warning, but he grunted in acknowledgement anyway, propelling himself backward with a series of sharp, concussive explosions from his palms. Where Bakugo had been standing just a microsecond prior, the air shattered like glass. A black, swirling vortex erupted in its place, swallowing a crumpled sedan whole before snapping shut with a sound like a thunderclap. Izuku's breath hitched. Danger sense was humming relentlessly at the base of his skull, a sharp, needle-like pressure that warned him of imminent, omnipresent threats. The villain's quirk, Spatial Rend, was unstable. He wasn't just teleporting objects, he was blindly opening portals to God knew where, and he couldn't control them anymore. The man's arms were glowing with an aggressive, sickly violet light, the skin cracking under the strain of his own awakened power. "Stay back, heroes!" The villain shrieked, his voice raw and echoing with a strange, dual-toned resonance. He slashed his hands wildly through the air. "I won't go back. I'll tear the whole city into the void if I have to." "He's reaching his physical limit," Izuku analyzed, his mind racing a mile a minute. "The portals are getting larger, but they're staying open longer. If he opens one near the subway lines, the civilian casualties. I have to close the distance." Now, green lightning flared to life around Izuku's body, hissing as it struck the wet pavement. Red, vein-like lines illuminated beneath his skin as he called upon the power passed down to him. One for all, full cowling 45%. The power was a roaring furnace in his chest, a tempest of kinetic energy begging to be released. Izuku bent his knees, the reinforced iron soles of his hero costume grinding against the concrete. "Deku! Don't you dare rush him!" Bakugo yelled, ready to blast forward. But Izuku was already moving. He kicked off the ground with a force that shattered the pavement, launching himself forward like a bullet. The wind screamed past his ears. He needed to incapacitate the villain before another rift could be opened. He reared his right leg back, preparing for a sweeping shoot-style kick to disarm the man. The villain saw the flash of green approaching. Panic twisted his features. In a frantic, last-ditch effort, the villain thrust both hands directly into the path of Izuku's incoming attack and screamed, unleashing every drop of his remaining stamina. Reality didn't just fracture, it exploded. A portal the size of a building tore open directly in front of Izuku. It wasn't black like the others. It was a dizzying kaleidoscope of neon pinks, sickening purples, and blinding whites. Danger sense didn't just hum, it shrieked like a dying animal in Izuku's mind. He tried to alter his trajectory, firing a burst of compressed air from his gloves, Air Force, but the gravitational pull of the rift was immense, defying all laws of physics. It felt like a massive, invisible hand had wrapped around his entire body. "Deku!" Bakugo's voice was suddenly very distant, muffled as if underwater. Izuku reached a hand out toward the rainy streets of Japan, toward his childhood friend, toward safety. But his fingers closed around empty, cold space. The blinding light swallowed him whole, and the sound of the rain was instantly replaced by a deafening, terrifying silence. Then the pain hit. It felt as though his very atoms were being stretched across infinity. Izuku couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't hear. Inside the core of his power, he felt the vestiges of One for All, the previous wielders of the quirk, stirring violently in alarm. A kaleidoscope of alien stars and swirling nebulas whipped past his eyes. He squeezed his eyes shut, gritting his teeth against the sheer, nauseating vertigo, praying that his body wouldn't be torn apart. And just as suddenly as the sensation began, it vanished. gravity reasserted itself with a vicious vengeance. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He was no longer in the vortex. In fact, he wasn't anywhere he recognized. First came the smell. Gone was the scent of wet asphalt and rain. Instead, his nostrils were assaulted by the heavy, pungent odor of sulfur, mixed with the strange, sweet scent of rotting fruit and ancient dust. Then came the sights. Above him was a sky the color of a fresh bruise, a mottled canvas of deep reds, purples, and yellows. The clouds were sickly and gray, but worst of all was the direction he was moving. He was falling. Fast. Wah! Izuku choked, the wind rushing into his mouth. He flailed his limbs, desperately trying to orient himself. He was thousands of feet in the air, plummeting toward a sprawling, bizarre landmass. His analytical mind, honed by years of obsessive note-taking and combat training, immediately tried to process the landscape below, even as panic clawed at his throat. He saw forests of trees with violet and crimson leaves. He saw rolling hills. And, jutting out of the earth like mountains, he saw bones, massive, bleached white ribs that pierced the clouds, curving over the land like the fingers of a dead god. Beyond the landmass was a vast, sprawling ocean that was literally boiling, churning with thick, pinkish steam. Where am I? Izuku's mind screamed. A teleportation quirk? No, the atmosphere is completely different. The villain said he'd tear the city into the void. Is this another dimension? Another planet? Stay calm, Izuku. Assess. Survive. The wind tore at his dark green cowl and his iron-soled boots. The ground was rushing up to meet him at terminal velocity. He needed to slow down, or he'd be nothing but a smear on this alien dirt. Izuku raised his hands, focusing his power into his fingertips. The familiar red lines flared across his arms, followed by the comforting crackle of green electricity. One for all, 20%. He flicked his fingers downward in rapid succession. Delaware smash. Air Force. Boom! 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 3 compressed bullets of air shot downward, colliding with the atmosphere. The resulting shockwaves pushed upward against Izuku, drastically slowing his descent. The abrupt deceleration violently jerked his body, making his ribs ache, but it worked. He wasn't falling at a lethal speed anymore. As he descended closer to the canopy of the bizarre, purple-leafed forest, danger sense suddenly flared again. It wasn't a world-ending threat like the portal, but it was a sharp, aggressive intent coming from directly below him. Izuku twisted his body in midair, peering down through the branches. In a clearing near the edge of a cliff stood a solitary, crooked stone tower with a massive stained glass eye for a window, and right in the front yard of this strange house, a battle was taking place. Luz Nocita was having a deeply frustrating Tuesday. Or was it Wednesday? Time in the Boiling Isles was weird, and honestly, the days sort of bled together when your mentor was a chaotic witch with a penchant for stealing from the wrong people. Ida, I told you we shouldn't have taken that shiny rock from the cave, Luz yelled, diving behind a crumbling stone wall as a massive, spiky tail slammed into the dirt where she had been standing seconds before. It wasn't a rock, kid. It was a rare, calcified Titan gallstone. Do you have any idea how many snails this thing will fetch at the night market? Ida the owl lady yelled back, twirling her palisman staff. She tapped the wooden owl, Owlbert, against the ground, summoning a massive ring of orange fire that forced their attacker to recoil. The attacker in question was a slitherbeast, a massive, 6-legged reptilian predator with scales like jagged obsidian, glowing yellow eyes, and a mouth full of razor-sharp fangs dripping with acidic saliva. Usually, slitherbeasts stayed in the frozen tundra of the knee, but this one had apparently wandered into the warmer forests, found a shiny rock to sleep on, and taken immense personal offense when Ida had casually stuffed it into her hair. It's a rock, and it's angry. King, the self-proclaimed king of demons, shrieked from his hiding spot inside a hollowed-out log. He clutched his stuffed rabbit, Francois, tightly to his chest. Destroy it, Ida. Show it the wrath of the owl lady. Working on it, fuzzball. Ida grunted, spinning her staff to block a glob of acid the beast spat at her. The acid sizzled against her magical shield, melting the grass beneath it. She fired a barrage of light blasts, but they harmlessly pinged off the slitherbeast's thick, armored hide. Ugh, this thing's scales are harder than my ex's heart. Luz. A little help over here, right? Luz reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the crisp parchment of her glyph cards. She pulled out a card with a meticulously drawn plant glyph on it. She waited for the beast to lunge at Ida again, then slapped the paper onto the dirt. A burst of glowing green magic erupted from the paper, rapidly growing into thick, thorny vines that shot upward, wrapping tightly around the slither beast's front legs. The beast roared in surprise, tripping and crashing into the dirt, its massive jaws snapping just inches from Ida's boots. Ha! Gotcha! Luz cheered, pumping a fist into the air, but her celebration was premature. The slither beast thrashed wildly. With a sickening crack, the magical vines snapped under its immense physical strength. The creature let out a deafening roar, turning its furious, glowing eyes away from Ida and directly toward the frail human who had dared to tie it up. Luz's breath caught in her throat. The beast coiled its muscular body, preparing to pounce. Luz, move! Ida screamed, abandoning her treasure and diving toward her apprentice, her staff raised to cast a shield. But they both knew she wasn't going to be fast enough. The beast launched itself into the air, its jaws unhinging, a shadow falling over Luz. Luz squeezed her eyes shut, crossing her arms in a futile attempt to brace for an impact she knew would break her. Danger sense, critical. High above, Izuku saw the beast lunge at the girl in the weird cat ear hoodie. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what that monster was, but his body moved before he could even think. I won't let anyone die in front of me. Izuku curled his body inward, channeling the power of one for all entirely into his legs. The green lightning flared so brightly it momentarily illuminated the gloomy red sky. He engaged his quirk, pushing it past his comfort zone. 30%. Black energy, crackling with crimson light, erupted from his shoulder. Black whip! The dark tendrils shot upward, wrapping around the thick branch of a nearby tree. Izuku used the momentum of his fall, combined with the tensile strength of Black Whip, to slingshot himself downward at a blinding, supersonic speed. He broke the sound barrier with a sharp crack, hurtling toward the ground like a green meteor. Luz heard the sound of thunder. She kept her eyes shut, waiting for the teeth. Smash! A voice, booming, youthful, and echoing with sheer, raw power, roared from the heavens. Luz's eyes snapped open just in time to see a blur of green and black intersect with the massive slither beast in midair. It was a boy. He had descended from the sky, his body twisting in a flawless, acrobatic spin, his leg, glowing with a terrifying network of glowing red lines and crackling green lightning, slammed directly into the side of the slither beast's armored skull. Shoot style, St. Louis smash. The impact was cataclysmic. The air pressure alone created a visible, white shockwave that ripped outward. Luz and Ida were blown backward off their feet, tumbling into the dirt as the wind howled around them. Trees at the edge of the clearing violently bent backward, leaves stripping from their branches. The slither beast, a creature weighing several tons, didn't just get knocked away. It was launched. The beast was sent skipping across the ground like a stone on a pond, crashing through 3 thick trees before finally coming to a halt, deeply embedded in a stone boulder. Its tongue lolled out of its mouth, its eyes rolled back into its head. It was completely, utterly unconscious. Silence descended upon the owl house yard, save for the gentle settling of dust and falling leaves. Luz pushed herself up onto her elbows, coughing and waving the dust away from her face. Her wide, hazel eyes stared at the crater that had just been formed in her front yard. Standing in the center of the crushed earth was the boy. He was young, probably around her age, with a mess of untamable, fluffy green hair. He wore a strange, dark green bodysuit with black knee pads, heavy iron-soled boots, and a torn caul hanging around his neck. White gloves covered his hands, which were currently curled into loose fists. But the most incredible thing was the energy radiating off him. Static electricity, emerald green and bright, danced across his skin, emitting a soft, humming sound. Steam rose from his shoulders, mingling with the cool air. Izuku exhaled slowly, the green lightning fading back into his skin as he powered down one for all. He hissed in pain, rubbing his calf. He had pushed a little too hard on that kick, and the unfamiliar gravity and air pressure had thrown his trajectory off by a millimeter. He quickly shook the pain away and turned around. His eyes widened with immediate concern when he saw the two people sitting in the dirt. Izuku rushed over, his posture shifting from a terrifying combatant to a frantic, apologetic teenager. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked, his voice cracking slightly with worry as he dropped to one knee beside Luz. He reached a gloved hand out. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause such a huge shockwave, but I couldn't gauge the monster's durability, and I was falling too fast, and I didn't want you to get eaten. Are you hurt? Do you need a doctor?" Luz didn't take his hand immediately. She just stared at him. Her mind, heavily steeped in years of consuming anime, manga, and fantasy novels, was short-circuiting. Green spiky hair? Check. Tragic-looking tattered outfit? Check. Literally fell from the sky with a super move? Check. Emits lightning? Check. You. Luz whispered, her eyes sparkling like stars. You're an anime protagonist. Izuku blinked, utterly derailed by the comment. What? No, I'm just... Whoa, hold the phone. Ida interrupted, marching over and dusting off her maroon dress. She pushed Luz behind her protectively, though her golden eyes were raking over Izuku with intense, calculating scrutiny. She held her staff tightly, the wooden owl glowing ominously. Who the heck are you, kid? And what coven do you belong to? Because I have never seen magic like that in my entire life. You didn't even draw a spell circle. You just kicked it. Izuku stood up, taking a cautious step back, his hands raised placatingly. He was trying to process her words. Coven? Magic? Spell circle? He looked at Ida. She had pale skin, wild, voluminous gray hair, a gold fawn, and, were those pointed ears? He looked down at Luz. She looked like a normal human girl, but she was holding a piece of paper with strange geometric symbols drawn on it. Izuku's muttering habit, his ultimate coping mechanism for stress and confusion, activated on autopilot. Magic? No, that was my quirk, but if you don't know what a quirk is, then I must be outside of Japan, or maybe isolated from modern society. But she spoke Japanese. No, wait, she spoke English, and I understood it, which means my brain is translating or we just happen to share a language. But pointed ears? A mutant-type quirk? And that staff? Support gear? But it was hovering earlier. Anti-gravity tech? No, the energy output was completely anomalous, and the flora here is entirely purple, which implies a different photosynthetic process, possibly utilizing a different wavelength of light, which could mean I'm not on Earth. If I'm not on Earth, then the villain's spatial wren didn't just teleport me, it shifted me across dimensional planes. Izuku was currently a blurry, vibrating green blob, his hand on his chin, spitting out words at 100 miles an hour. Luz gasped, clutching her chest. Oh my gosh, he even has the internal monologue mutter freakout. He's perfect. Ida squinted, poking Izuku in the forehead with the butt of her staff, snapping him out of his trance. Hey! Earth to Greenie. Stop vibrating, you're making my eyes cross. I asked you a question? Who are you? Izuku immediately stood up straight, his hero training kicking in. He bowed deeply, a perfect 90-degree angle. I am Izuku Midoriya. Hero name, Deku. I'm a student at UA High School, Department of Heroics. It is a pleasure to meet you, and I apologize for trespassing. Ida stared at the bowing boy. She looked at Luz. Luz looked back, shrugging with a massive, giddy grin. UA High? Ida rubbed her chin. Never heard of it. Is it a rival school to Hex side? Bah, doesn't matter. Look, Deku, I don't know what a heroic is, but that kick of yours just flattened a slitherbeast in one hit. Do you have any idea how much meat we can harvest from that thing? I could sell the scales for a fortune. Kid, how would you like a job? I pay in snails, room, and board, and occasionally, I won't use you as live bait. A live bait? Izuku squeaked, straightening up. Ida, stop trying to recruit the interdimensional traveler into your illegal businesses. Luz scolded, stepping around her mentor. She approached Izuku, extending her hand. Hi! I'm Luz no Sita. I'm a human, and a witch in training. And this is Ida, The most powerful witch on the Boiling Isles. Witch? Izuku repeated, his brain struggling to categorize the information. It has to be a quirked illusion. Maybe I was hit by an illusion quirk. I don't understand. Boiling Isles? Hoot hoot. New friend. A high-pitched, incredibly grating voice echoed right next to Izuku's ear. Izuku slowly turned his head. Stretching from the front door of the stone tower, extending horizontally across the yard like a horrifying, fleshy snake, was a wooden owl face. It was currently 3 inches from Izuku's nose, blinking at him. Hi! I'm Hooty. You smell like sweat and static electricity. Wanna hear a story about a bug I ate? Hooty smiled, his wooden face contorting in a way that defied anatomy. Danger sense didn't go off, but Izuku's sheer primal terror did. Gah! Izuku scrambled backward, tripping over his own iron-soled boots and falling unceremoniously onto his back. He pointed a trembling finger at the tube owl. What is that? Is that your quirk? He's a house demon, Luz explained cheerfully, helping Izuku to his feet. Don't worry, you get used to him. Eventually. I think. Actually, I still get nightmares sometimes. Nightmares? I'm a dream come true. Hoot hoot. Hooty retracted, snapping back into the door like a tape measure. Izuku felt lightheaded. This was too much. The sky, the monster, the magic, the talking tube. He reached into one of the pouches on his utility belt. My phone. I just need to call Mr. Aizawa, or All Might, or my mom, anyone. He pulled out his smartphone. The screen was cracked from the battle, but it turned on. No signal. Emergency calls only failed. Izuku stared at the screen. The reality of the situation was finally crashing down on him, breaking through the adrenaline that had kept him going. He wasn't in Muzurifu. He wasn't in Japan. He was completely, utterly alone, in a world where nothing made sense. His breathing hitched. His chest tightened. The ghosts of his past, the years of being quirkless, the anxiety, the overwhelming burden of being All Might's successor, flared up. If he wasn't there to master one for all, who would stop Shigaraki? What if the villain with the space quirk killed Kaken? What if his mom was watching the news right now, seeing him vanish? Hey! A soft voice broke through his spiraling panic. Izuku looked up. Luz was standing right in front of him, her hazel eyes filled with a deep, profound empathy that instantly disarmed him. It was a look of someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be a stranger in a strange land. You're not from around here, are you? Luz asked softly. Like, really not from around here. Izuku swallowed hard, his throat dry. He looked at the cracked screen of his phone, then at Luz. I think I'm from a different world. Ida leaned against her staff, crossing her arms. Another dimension, huh? Well, that explains the lack of a bile sac and the crazy raw power. You're like a human, but spicier. She chuckled, though her eyes were surprisingly gentle. Listen, kid. The boiling owls chew up and spit out anything that doesn't know how to survive. But you just saved my apprentice from becoming a slitherbeast chew toy. Ida walked over and placed a surprisingly warm hand on Izuku's rigid shoulder. You've got nowhere to go, right? Then welcome to the Owl House. We specialize in widows, outcasts, and apparently interdimensional green lightning kids. Luz beamed, grabbing Izuku's hands and shaking them vigorously. This is going to be so awesome. We can compare dimensional notes. I can teach you about magic, you can teach me about whatever you did to turn your legs into a missile. Izuku looked at Luz's bright, welcoming smile. Then he looked at Ida, who was already scheming as she eyed the unconscious slitherbeast. He felt the hum of one for all in his chest. It was calm now. He didn't know how he was going to get home. He didn't know how he was going to fulfill his duty as the ninth wielder of One for All. But as he looked at the human girl who had clearly found a home among the bizarre, Izuku felt a small spark of hope. Okay, Izuku said, managing a shaky, but genuine smile. I'll be in your care. Thank you, Luz. Thank you, Ida. Don't thank me yet, kid, Ida smirked, turning toward the house. You're doing the dishes tonight. Hooty's been eating mud again. As they walked toward the crooked stone tower, Izuku Midoriya pulled out his charred, waterlogged hero notebook. He flipped to a blank page at the very back, clicking his pen. Entry 1, The Boiling Isles, Witches, Magic, and Demons. Objective, find a way back home. And until then, protect this world with everything I have. The hero Deku had arrived in the demon realm. And nothing in the Boiling Isles would ever be the same. The interior of the owl house was, to put it mildly, an absolute sensory overload for Izuku Midoriya. As he stepped through the threshold, carefully sidestepping Hooty, who was currently trying to swallow a large, squirming centipede whole, Izuku's green eyes darted rapidly across the room. Every square inch of the living space defied the architectural and logical standards of Earth. The walls were cluttered with wanted posters, strange talismans, and jars containing things that were occasionally blinking at him. Piles of human garbage, ranging from a broken television set to a pile of rusty license plates, were displayed as if they were priceless artifacts. Make yourself at home, kid, Ida called out, tossing her staff into the air. Albert detached himself with a soft hoot and fluttered up to the rafters. Just don't touch the jar of eyes on the mantel. They're on a strict sleep schedule, and they get terribly bloodshot if you wake them. Izuku immediately yanked his hands back to his chest, nodding furiously. Why yes, ma'am. I won't touch anything. Before he could take another step, a loud, booming voice echoed from the upstairs landing. Who dares enter the domain of the King of Demons without offering tribute? Izuku froze. His danger sense didn't activate, but his hero training made him drop into a defensive stance, his feet shoulder-width apart. He looked up toward the stairs, expecting a towering, fearsome beast to match the booming, imperious tone. Instead, a tiny creature roughly the size of a corgi waddled down the steps. It had dark, plush-looking fur, a skull-like head with a broken horn, and it was carrying a rather ragged-looking stuffed rabbit. King reached the bottom of the stairs, pointed a clawed finger at Izuku, and puffed out his chest. You, green-haired peasant, tremble before my terrifying visage. I demand you bow and offer me snacks, lest I unleash my unparalleled wrath upon your fragile mortal form. Izuku blinked. He relaxed his stance, staring down at the tiny, skull-faced creature. His analytical mind immediately categorized the entity. A chimera-type mutant? No, he speaks perfect language, which implies high-level cognitive function, similar to Principal Niza at UA. But his morphology is entirely unique. He looks like a cross between a canine and a cub one from Pokemon. Wait, no, focus Izuku. A talking animal. Izuku murmured, his eyes glittering with fascination. I am not an animal. King screeched, stamping his foot. I am a demon. The ruler of all nightmares. Kneel. Izuku, completely missing the threat and entirely charmed by the creature's diminutive size and fluffy tail, dropped to one knee. But it wasn't a bow of submission. He reached a gloved hand out, his innate, golden retriever-like personality taking over. You're amazing, Izuku said brightly, gently scratching King right behind his unbroken horn. Is your quirk related to your physiology, or is your intelligence a secondary mutation? Your vocal cords must be fascinating to articulate human speech so perfectly. King stiffened. He opened his mouth to unleash a tirade of insults, but the moment Izuku's fingers hit the sweet spot behind his ear, his leg betrayed him. King's right leg started thumping rapidly against the floorboards. What are you doing? Unhand me, peasant! I command. Oh wow, that's actually the spot. Right there. Yes. Who's a fearsome dictator? I am. King leaned into Izuku's hand, a loud, rumbling purr vibrating from his chest. Luz covered her mouth, trying desperately to stifle a giggle. Oh my gosh, you broke him in 10 seconds. It usually takes me at least a belly rub to get him to submit. Submit? I am merely lulling him into a false sense of security. King squeaked defensively, though he made no move to escape Izuku's scratches. All right, break it up, you two, Ida commanded, marching into the living room with a glowing, crystalline magnifying glass in her hand. Greenie, have a seat on the couch. It's time for a little medical exam. Izuku stood up, instantly wary. A medical exam? But I'm not injured. Maybe not on the outside, Ida said, her golden eyes narrowing as she pointed the glass at him. But I need to figure out what the heck is going on inside you. You generated enough raw kinetic energy to turn a slitherbeast into a skipping stone, but I didn't sense a single drop of magic aura from you before you did it, which means either you're a master at concealing your magical signature, or you've got a freakishly large bile sac. Sit. Not wanting to disrespect his host, Izuku awkwardly sat on the edge of the lumpy, claw-footed couch. Luz sat next to him, leaning in closely with wide, curious eyes. Ida held the glowing glass up to Izuku's chest. The crystal illuminated his ribcage like an X-ray, projecting a faint blue image of his beating heart and lungs into the air between them. Ida squinted, tapping the glass. What the? She moved the glass around his chest, then his stomach, then up to his throat. Okay, this is officially the weirdest thing I've seen all week, and I saw a man eat his own head on Tuesday. What is it, Ida? Luz asked, leaning closer. He doesn't have one, Ida declared, lowering the glass. She looked at Izuku as if he were a puzzle missing half its pieces. Kid, you have absolutely no magic bile sac attached to your heart. In fact, your anatomy is completely, 100% identically mundane to Luz's. You're physically incapable of doing magic. So how in the Titan's name did you blow up my front yard? Izuku's eyes widened. He reached into his utility belt and pulled out his charred, waterlogged hero notebook. He flipped past pages filled with sketches of pro-heroes like Endeavor and Hawks, finding a blank spread. He clicked his pen, and then, the muttering began. A bile sac? So magic in this world isn't an ethereal, spiritual energy, but a biological function? That implies a distinct evolutionary divergence from humans. If magic is produced by a specialized organ attached to the cardiovascular system, it means spellcasting requires physical stamina and blood flow. It's essentially a biological quirk factor, but if spell circles are required, then the magic must need a geometric catalyst to manifest physically, whereas quirks are directly linked to neural pathways and physical limbs. Does ambient atmosphere play a role? The boiling isle seems to have a high concentration of unknown magical radiation. Wait, if she assumed I used magic, that means my quirk, one for all, registers to them as anomalous because it mimics a physical enhancement spell without the biological prerequisite. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Ida waved her hands, staring at Izuku with a mixture of awe and deep concern. Did he just cast a spell on himself? Why is his mouth moving so fast? Is he having a seizure? Luz was practically vibrating with excitement. No, Ida. He's analyzing. It's a classic genius character trope. She grabbed Izuku's shoulder, snapping him out of his trance. Izuku, right? You said your name is Izuku. That notebook, what is all that? Izuku blinked, his cheeks flushing with immediate embarrassment. Oh. Sorry. It's a bad habit. I tend to overthink when I encounter new quirk. I mean magic systems. These are my hero analysis notebooks. He tentatively held the notebook out to Luz. She took it gently, marveling at the intricate, incredibly detailed sketches of heroes, complete with diagrams of their powers, support gear, and tactical weaknesses. This is incredible, Luz breathed. It's like a real-life bestiary, but for superheroes. You draw all this? Yeah. I want to be a pro-hero, so I study everyone I can, Izuku said softly, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked at Luz, then at Ida, who was leaning over Luz's shoulder to look at a drawing of Kamui Woods. You said my anatomy is identical to yours, Luz. Does that mean you're quirkless too? I mean magicless? Luz's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a brief flash of vulnerability crossing her face before she masked it with a determined grin. Yep. Just a fragile, squishy human. No magic bile sac for me. Then how do you survive here? Izuku asked, his voice laced with genuine awe. He knew better than anyone the sheer terror of facing superpowered threats without an inherent power of his own. The sludge villain incident flashed briefly in his mind. Luz reached into her pocket and pulled out a stack of paper cards. She fanned them out, revealing 4 distinct symbols: light, ice, plant, and fire. Glyphs. Luz announced proudly. I figured out that the magic of the Boiling Isles is in nature itself. Witches use their bile sacs to draw spell circles in the air, but I found out that if you draw the fundamental geometric shapes of the magic, the glyphs, The environment does the magic for you. Watch. She tapped the light glyph. The paper crumpled in on itself, disintegrating into a perfectly spherical, warm orb of glowing yellow light that floated up to the ceiling. Izuku's jaw hit the floor. His eyes tracked the orb. That's genius, he breathed, a wide, radiant smile breaking out across his face. You bypassed the biological limitation through environmental observation and geometric application. Luz, that's incredible. You didn't let your lack of a biological power stop you. You forged your own path. Luz felt her cheeks heat up. Back in the human realm, people called her weird. Here in the demon realm, Amity and the others had initially looked down on her for being human. Ida supported her, but Ida was inherently chaotic. To hear a boy who literally fell from the sky with the power of a god validate her hard work with such fierce, genuine admiration, it hit her right in the heart. Thanks, Izuku, Luz said softly, her smile turning incredibly genuine. It means a lot. But what about you? If you're completely human, like me, how did you do that super kick? Izuku looked down at his gloved hands. He instinctively gripped his right hand, feeling the scarred, twisted tissue beneath the fabric, the permanent reminder of the power he wielded, and the price he paid to master it. He couldn't tell them about One for All. It was a secret he guarded with his life, a secret meant only for All Might, Bakugo, and a select few. Even in another dimension, he couldn't risk the nature of the power becoming public knowledge. In my world, it's called a quirk, Izuku explained carefully. About 80% of the population has a biological superpower. Some people can breathe fire, some can manipulate gravity, some just have extra arms. My quirk allows me to stockpile power and channel it through my body to enhance my physical strength, speed, and durability. He looked at Luz, a soft, empathetic smile on his face. But I wasn't always like this. In my world, I was part of the 20%. For most of my life, I was quirkless. Powerless, Luz gasped softly. Ida raised an eyebrow, suddenly paying much closer attention. People told me I couldn't be a hero, Izuku continued, his voice dropping to a quieter, more solemn register. They laughed at me. They told me to be realistic. But I couldn't give up. I studied, I took notes, and I tried to be ready for the day I could prove them wrong. He looked up, locking eyes with Luz. Eventually, I was given a chance. A blessing. My power. It was given to me by my mentor, the greatest hero in my world. But I know exactly what it feels like to stand at the bottom, looking up at everyone else, wondering if you'll ever be enough. The room was silent for a moment. King had stopped demanding scratches and was looking at Izuku with wide, curious eyes. Luz didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just reached out and wrapped her arms around Izuku in a fierce, tight hug. Izuku squeaked in surprise, his face turning bright red, but after a moment of rigid hesitation, he slowly returned the hug. We're going to get along just fine, Deku, Luz whispered. All right, enough of the sappy stuff, you're gonna make Hooty cry. And his tears are highly acidic, Ida interrupted, clapping her hands together. We've got business to attend to. Greenie, I don't care how you got your powers, as long as they don't blow up my house. Right now, I have a dead slither beast in my yard, and a whole lot of magical artifacts I need to hawk at the market. You're coming with us. Consider it a crash course in Boiling Isles culture. Izuku stood up, nodding determinedly. Yes, ma'am. I'll do whatever I can to help. Ida eyed his shredded, dark green hero costume. First things first, though. You can't wear that. You look like a weird, rejected vegetable. If the Emperor's Coven sees you walking around in that, they're going to ask questions, and I strictly avoid questions. Luz, give him one of my old cloaks. 10 minutes later, Izuku emerged from the bathroom wearing a tattered, dark gray cloak with a deep hood that comfortably hid his green hair and the distinctive shoulder pads of his UE uniform. He felt a bit like a fantasy rogue, which made the comic book nerd inside him flutter with excitement. The walk to Bonesborough was an exercise in restraint for Izuku. Everything he saw demanded a new page in his notebook. He saw trees with veins instead of bark. He saw a massive, winged creature swoop down and carry off a screaming, goblin-like entity. He saw a puddle of mud spontaneously form a face and belch. By the time they reached the gates of the town, Izuku was muttering so fast his lips were a blur. And the structural integrity of the town seems to rely heavily on petrified bone marrow, which suggests an incredible tensile strength capable of withstanding the highly corrosive rain Luz mentioned earlier. Wow, he really doesn't stop, does he? Ida noted, dragging a large sack of Slitherbeast parts behind her. I think it's his buffering screen, Luz laughed, walking beside Izuku. Welcome to Bones Burrow, Izuku. Try not to stare at anyone for too long. Eye contact is considered a challenge to a duel in some covens. Izuku pulled his hood down slightly to broaden his field of vision. Bones Burrow was chaotic. It was a bustling, medieval-looking marketplace crammed with creatures of every shape, size, and horrifying description. Witches with pointed ears haggled with demons that had tentacles for arms. The air smelled of roasted meat, sulfur, and ozone. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from an alleyway to their left. Izuku whipped his head around. A large, brutish demon with 4 arms had a smaller, timid-looking witch pinned against a brick wall, demanding his wallet. Izuku's eyes narrowed. The green lightning sparked instinctively across his knuckles. He took a step toward the alley. A mugging. Luz grabbed the back of his cloak, yanking him back. Whoa, superhero! Down, boy! That's just how people ask for directions in that neighborhood. He's extorting him. Izuku protested, his sense of justice completely appalled. As a hero, I have to intervene, kid. If you intervene every time someone does something illegal in Bones Burrow, you're going to be fighting until you die of old age, Ida said, setting up her folding table in a dusty corner of the square. She began dumping human trash, Rubik's cubes, batteries, a single Crocs shoe, onto the table. Morality here is flexible. Speaking of which, watch the booth. Mama's got to go restock her inventory. Ida winked, her hand glowing with a faint yellow light as she casually strolled into the bustling crowd. Izuku and Luz stood behind the table. Izuku watched Ida walk away, his eyes tracking her movements. He saw her bump into a wealthy-looking witch in purple robes. Ida apologized smoothly, but as she walked away, a heavy coin purse magically floated out of the witch's pocket and into Ida's sleeve. Izuku's jaw dropped. As she picked his pocket. Yep, Luz said, popping the pea. Ida's a wild witch. She does what she wants. Izuku gripped his hair. But that's theft. That's a crime. She's a villain? No. No, Luz panicked, waving her hands. She's not a villain. She's just morally gray. The government here is evil, Izuku. Emperor Bellows forces everyone into covens, and seals away their magic if they don't comply. Ida is a rebel. She steals to survive. Izuku tried to process this. In his world, the law was the law. Heroes upheld it. Villains broke it. But he also remembered Stain. He remembered Lady Nagant. He remembered how the Hero Public Safety Commission operated in the shadows. He knew the world wasn't purely black and white, but outright pickpocketing civilians on the street, that went against every fiber of his being. A few moments later, Ida strutted back to the booth, a triumphant grin on her face. She tossed 3 stolen coin purses onto the table. Business is booming. The rubes are practically throwing their money at me today. Izuku took a deep breath. He channeled his inner Tenya Ida. He stood up straight, his hands chopping the air rigidly. Ida-san, as a host who has graciously taken me in, I am deeply indebted to you. However, as a hero in training of Yui High School, I cannot in good conscience allow you to engage in petty larceny. It is unbecoming, unjust, and violates the basic social contract. Ida stared at him, utterly dumbfounded by the boy's strict, robotic posture and chopping hands. What are you doing with your arms? Are you malfunctioning? Before Ida could stop him, Izuku snatched the 3 coin purses off the table. Utilizing just 5% of one for all, he blurred into the crowd. Hey! Get back here, you little green scout! Ida yelled. Izuku moved with terrifying grace through the crowd. He spotted the wealthy witch in purple. He tapped him on the shoulder, bowed deeply, handed him the purse, said, "You dropped this, please be more careful," in a rushed tone, and darted away before the witch could even blink. He repeated this with the other two victims, returning their stolen goods with profound apologies and deep, respectful bows. He reappeared behind Ida's stall 3 seconds later, completely out of breath but morally satisfied. Ida looked at the empty spot on her table, then at Izuku. Her left eye twitched. Did you just unrob my marks? I couldn't let you taint your soul with theft, Izuku proclaimed earnestly. Luz slapped a hand over her face, groaning. Oh man, he's a lawful good paladin. Ida is going to kill him. Ida reached for her staff, a vein popping on her forehead. Listen here, you little do-gooder. I feed you, I clothe you, I don't dissect you for science, and this is how you repay me? By ruining my hustle? Hey! All lady! A loud, furious voice cut through Ida's tirade. The crowd parted as a massive, towering demon stomped toward their booth. He looked like a minotaur crossed with a boulder, his skin the color of dried blood. He was holding a plastic, light-up toy sword that Ida had clearly sold him. You told me this human Excalibur could cut through diamond. The demon roared, snapping the plastic sword over his knee. It let out a pathetic squeak. I tried to use it in a duel, and I was made a laughingstock. I want my money back, or I'm taking your head, Ida scoffed, putting a hand on her hip. No refunds, muscle brain. Read the sign. She pointed to a scrap of cardboard that said no refunds, especially you. The demon roared, his massive fist glowing with red magic. He lunged across the table, aiming a devastating haymaker straight for Ida's face. Ida went to raise a spell circle, but she didn't need to. Izuku stepped in front of her. He didn't use one for all. He didn't want to destroy the marketplace. He relied on pure, unadulterated martial arts, the close-quarters combat training he had drilled into his bones with Gunhead and Aizawa. As the demon's massive fist came crashing down, Izuku stepped inside his guard. He parried the strike with his left forearm, redirecting the brute's momentum. With lightning speed, Izuku dropped his center of gravity, grabbed the demon by his thick wrist and belt, and used the creature's own massive weight against him. With a loud grunt, Izuku executed a flawless judo throw. The massive demon was flipped entirely over Izuku's shoulder, crashing back first into the dirt with a thud that shook the stalls around them. Before the demon could even groan in pain, Izuku was kneeling over him. He had the demon's arm locked in a textbook submission hold, pulling the elbow just shy of its breaking point. Violence is not the answer, Izuku said firmly, his eyes flashing with a stern, authoritative intensity that completely contrasted his previously timid demeanor. Please calm down and refrain from attacking my friends, the demon whined, tapping the dirt frantically with his free hand. Okay. I yield. Just don't snap my wing joint, kid. Izuku immediately released the demon, standing up and brushing the dust off his knees. The demon scrambled to his feet and ran away into the crowd, terrified of the strange, unmagical boy who had just tossed him like a sack of flour. The marketplace went dead silent. Everyone was staring at the stall. Izuku nervously rubbed the back of his neck, looking at Ida. I hope I didn't overstep. I just didn't want him to hit you. Ida stared at the retreating demon, then down at Izuku. A slow, deeply chaotic grin spread across her face. Okay, Ida muttered, her eyes gleaming with newfound appreciation. So you're a goody two-shoes who actively ruins my business. But you're also a ridiculously overpowered bodyguard who can toss a mountain troll with his bare hands. She reached out and roughly ruffled Izuku's green hair. You're hired, Deku. Full-time. But next time you return a wallet I stole, I'm making you eat Hootie's leftovers. Izuku grimaced at the threat but nodded. I understand. I'll try to find a compromise. Luz walked up beside him, nudging his shoulder with hers. You know, for a guy who just had an existential crisis an hour ago, you're adapting pretty fast. I have to, Izuku said quietly, looking up at the bizarre, reddish-purple sky of the boiling isles. A hero doesn't get to choose where they're needed. They just have to be ready. He looked back at Luz and Ida. They were strange, they were definitely lawbreakers, but they were good people. For the first time since falling through the portal, Izuku felt a genuine sense of calm. He was in a magical world filled with monsters, demons, and chaotic witches. I'm definitely going to need a bigger notebook, Izuku thought, a small smile playing on his lips as he followed his new friends back into the chaos of Bones Burrow. Morning on the Boiling Isles was a peculiar phenomenon. Instead of the warm, golden rays of a rising sun, the sky transitioned from a bruised, inky purple to a violently bright crimson. Izuku Midoriya sat on the roof of the owl house, his knees pulled to his chest, a freshly sharpened pencil flying across the pages of his newly dedicated Boiling Isles bestiary notebook. He had been awake for hours. Sleep had eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the blinding light of the villain's portal, followed by the terrified faces of his mother and his classmates at UA High. To cope, Izuku did what he always did, he analyzed. Item 14, Demon Flora. The grass here occasionally attempts to bite ankles. Evolutionary trait to deter herbivores? Requires heavily reinforced footwear. Note: check the soles of my hero boots for acid damage. Hey! Whatcha doing up here, bird boy? Izuku flinched, nearly dropping his notebook as Luz poked her head out of the attic window. She hoisted herself onto the shingles, careful not to slip on the morning dew, which smelled faintly of sour apples. Oh, just taking notes, Izuku replied, offering a tired but genuine smile. He closed the book, running a thumb over the charred edge of the cover. Trying to make sense of the local ecosystem. If I'm going to be stuck here for a while, I need to understand the environment. Knowledge is half the battle, right? Luz sat beside him, pulling her knees up to mirror his posture. She looked at the notebook, then out at the sprawling, bizarre landscape of the Isles. You really miss them, don't you? Your mom. Your friends. More than anything, Izuku admitted softly, his grip on the notebook tightening. In my world, the villains are getting stronger. A lot stronger. My mentor gave me this quirk so I could protect people. If I'm not there, I feel like I'm failing them. Luz gently bumped her shoulder against his. You didn't abandon them, Izuku. You got sucked into a magical vortex. It happens to the best of us. She shot him a cheeky wink, trying to lift his spirits. Besides, you're not failing anyone. You've been here less than a day and you've already saved my life and stopped a marketplace brawl. You're a hero through and through. Izuku felt a warmth spread in his chest. Luz had an incredible gift for empathy. Thank you, Luz. Which is exactly why, Luz continued, her eyes suddenly sparkling with a mischievous, conspiratorial glint, we are going to get you home. And I know exactly where to start looking. Izuku perked up. You do? Yep. Hexside's School of Magic and Demonics. Specifically, their restricted library section, Luz declared, standing up and balancing precariously on the slanted roof. If there's any recorded history of dimensional travel, Titan's blood, or portal magic, it's going to be in those books. I usually sneak in to learn spells, but today, we're going on an interdimensional lore hunt. Izuku stood up, his hero instincts immediately calculating the logistics. Infiltrating a secure educational facility? That sounds incredibly risky. If we're caught, we could be charged with trespassing. Do they have magical security systems? Alarms? Guards? Luz waved a dismissive hand. Pfft, relax. The only thing we have to worry about is Principal Bump, and he's usually busy dealing with the abomination track. But you can't go looking like, well, an anime protagonist. You need a disguise. 10 minutes later, Izuku stood in the living room wearing the oversized, tattered gray cloak Ida had given him the day before. He pulled the deep hood over his head, casting his face in dark shadow. Only the faint, emerald glow of his eyes and the bridge of his freckled nose were visible. Beneath the cloak, he wore his reinforced UA boots and the black pants of his hero costume, ready to move at a moment's notice. Perfect, Luz whispered, adjusting the collar of the cloak for him. You look mysterious. Brooding. Like a guy who sits in the corner of a tavern waiting to give someone a quest. I just hope this doesn't violate any interdimensional treaties, Izuku muttered nervously, pulling the cloak tighter around himself. The trek to Hexside took less than an hour. As the massive, imposing structure of the magic school came into view, Izuku's breath hitched. The building was immense, constructed from pale stone that looked suspiciously like bone, with towering spires and stained glass windows. But what caught Izuku's attention wasn't the architecture, it was the atmosphere. Students in varying colors of tunics were bustling about the courtyard. Some were flying on wooden staves, others were conjuring small flames, and some were reading textbooks while floating upside down. Izuku's eyes widened beneath his hood. It's just like UA, he thought, a wave of intense nostalgia washing over him. A sanctuary for learning how to master incredible powers. The different colored sleeves. They must denote specific courses of study, just like our hero, support, general, and business departments. Okay, stick close to me, Luz whispered as they approached the front steps, blending into the crowd of arriving students. Keep your head down, don't make eye contact, and whatever you do, don't use your quirk. Understood, Izuku whispered back, analyzing the flow of foot traffic to perfectly match the walking speed of the students around him. His stealth training from Aizawa was finally paying off. They slipped through the heavy double doors and into the bustling main corridor. The lockers were groaning and occasionally snapping at students. The announcements were being broadcast through a terrifying, disembodied mouth on the wall. Izuku's hands twitched, desperate to pull out his notebook and start sketching, but he forced himself to keep his arms at his sides. Luz! A cheerful, high-pitched voice called out from the crowd. Luz smiled brightly, grabbing Izuku's wrist and dragging him toward a pair of students standing by a set of lockers. One was a young boy with dark skin, bright eyes, and a light blue tunic. The other was a slightly plumper girl with round glasses, a sweet smile, and a plant green tunic. Hey guys! Luz greeted them warmly. Willow, Gus, there's someone I want you to meet. But we have to keep it on the down low. Luz pulled Izuku forward. Izuku nervously reached up and pulled his hood back just enough to reveal his messy green hair and wide eyes. He offered a stiff, polite bow. Hello? I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's a pleasure to meet you. Willow blinked, adjusting her glasses. Oh, hi. I'm Willow. Are you a new transfer student? I haven't seen you in the illusion or plant tracks before. He's not a witch, Gus gasped, stepping forward. He whipped out a magnifying glass from his robes and shoved it right into Izuku's personal space, his eyes magnified to comical proportions. Look at the ears. Look at the lack of a magical aura. Luz, did you bring another human into the demon realm? Technically, he fell from the sky, Luz corrected. Gus grabbed Izuku's gloved hands, shaking them with bone-rattling enthusiasm. I'm Augustus. Gus for short. President of the Human Appreciation Society. I have so many questions. Is it true that humans have a calcium-based endoskeleton trapping them inside their own bodies? Do your sweat glands really produce a saline solution to regulate thermal equilibrium? Do you actually consume the unfertilized eggs of avian creatures for breakfast? Izuku, completely unfazed by the rapid-fire interrogation, instantly matched Gus's frantic energy. Yes to all three. Izuku beamed, his inner nerd delighted by the boy's scientific curiosity. Our endoskeletons provide structural support and protect vital organs. Thermal regulation through diaphoresis is essential for mammalian survival, though the salt content varies based on hydration. And yes, chicken eggs are a fantastic source of protein, especially for muscle synthesis after a heavy workout. Gus gasped, stars literally shining in his eyes. He pulled out a notebook and a quill. Fascinating. Muscle synthesis. Tell me more about this diaphoresis. Wait, Luz laughed, putting a hand on Gus's shoulder. We can do a human biology seminar later, Gus. Right now, Izuku and I need to get to the library. Willow smiled, though she looked a bit nervous. You should probably hurry then. The bell is about to ring, and you know how the hallway monitors get. As she spoke, she absent-mindedly traced a circle in the air with her finger. A small, thorny vine sprouted from the floor tiles, weaving around her ankle like an affectionate pet. Izuku's eyes instantly locked onto the vine. The muttering began. Plant manipulation. Spontaneous generation from inorganic material? No, there must be microscopic spores or seeds in the dust, or her magic acts as an instantaneous fertilizer and cellular accelerator. It's incredibly similar to Kamui Wood's arbor quirk, or Shiozaki's vine quirk from Class 1B. But she doesn't use her own body as the medium, she commands the environment. The tactical applications are staggering. If she can control the root structure, she could destabilize the footing of an entire battlefield in seconds. Willow froze, her cheeks flushing completely red. She looked at Izuku in shock. Why you think my magic is tactically staggering? Izuku stopped muttering, suddenly realizing he had spoken aloud. He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Oh. Sorry. I analyze powers a lot. Your magic is amazing, Willow. The way that vine grew, you have incredible control over its cellular growth. If you ever have to fight, instead of just using vines to whip or grab, you could focus on the root systems underneath your opponent. If you displace the earth beneath them, you completely ruin their center of gravity before they can even cast a spell. Willow stared at the green-haired boy. For years, she had been told she was a half-a-witch, placed in the abomination track where she struggled terribly, until she finally proved her worth in plant magic. But even now, people thought plant magic was just for gardening. No one had ever spoken about her abilities with such intense, strategic respect. A confident, blooming smile spread across Willow's face. Displace the roots, ruin their center of gravity. I really like that. Thank you, Izuku. Of course. Izuku smiled back. Well. If it isn't the human nuisance and her little club of underachievers. The warm atmosphere instantly shattered. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Izuku turned. Walking toward them was a girl with sharp features, a perfectly tailored purple tunic, and mint green hair tied back in a neat half ponytail. She carried a stack of heavy books under one arm, and she was looking down her nose at Luz and Willow with an expression of pure, unadulterated disdain. Amity, Luz said, her voice tightening with a mixture of annoyance and caution. We're just passing through. We don't want any trouble. Amity Blight stopped in front of the group. She didn't even look at Izuku, her golden eyes fixed entirely on Luz. You shouldn't even be here, Luz. Hexside is for witches who actually have a future, not humans who play pretend with paper drawings. And Willow. Amity's gaze shifted, her tone dripping with condescension. Playing with weeds in the hallway? Try not to trip over your own magic. It's pathetic. Willow flinched, shrinking back slightly, her confident smile vanishing. Gus glared, but he stepped back too, intimidated by the top student of the abomination track. Izuku watched the interaction, and suddenly, he wasn't standing in a magical hallway in the Boiling Isles. He was standing in the hallway of Aldera Junior High. He was quirkless again, clutching his burned notebook to his chest, while Katsuki Bakugo stood over him, explosions popping in his palms, telling him he was useless. A Deku. Izuku felt a familiar, protective anger flare in his chest. It wasn't a raging, explosive anger. It was the calm, immovable conviction of a hero who refused to let the strong prey on the weak. Before Amity could take another step, Izuku stepped gracefully in front of Willow and Luz, placing himself directly between them and the mint-haired witch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't power up his quirk. He just stood up completely straight, pulling his hood back slightly so his piercing emerald eyes locked directly onto Amity's golden ones. Excuse me, Izuku said, his voice polite but laced with a heavy, unyielding authority. But you're entirely incorrect. Amity blinked, startled. She finally took a good look at the stranger in the gray cloak. Excuse me? Who are you supposed to be? My name is Izuku Midoriya, he said evenly, not breaking eye contact. And I've spent a lot of time around people who think that being born with a powerful ability gives them the right to look down on others. But true strength isn't about how much power you have. It's about how you use it to elevate the people around you. Amity's eyes narrowed, her grip on her books tightening. I don't need a lecture from some nobody in a dirty cloak. I am the top student of my track. I worked hard for my position. I don't doubt your hard work, Izuku replied smoothly, his tone completely analytical and devoid of malice, which somehow made it hit harder. But if you have to resort to belittling your classmates to make yourself feel superior, then your foundation is incredibly fragile. Willow's magic is highly versatile and tactically sound. Luz's glyphs are a stroke of observational genius. If you can't see their potential, then maybe you aren't looking closely enough. Amity was completely speechless. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She was used to people cowering before her, or, in Luz's case, reacting with goofy, chaotic defiance. She had absolutely no defense against this calm, rational, and profoundly confident dissection of her behavior. It felt like she was being scolded by a disappointed teacher, but the boy standing in front of her was her own age. A light blush of embarrassment and frustration dusted Amity's cheeks. She scowled, clutching her books tighter to her chest. Whatever. Enjoy playing with weeds? I have a demonstration to prepare for in the gym. She spun on her heel and marched away, her posture rigid, clearly rattled by the encounter. Willow exhaled the breath she didn't know she was holding. She looked at Izuku as if he had just slain a dragon. Izuku, how did you do that? You didn't even raise your voice, and she just retreated. When you know who you are, and you know what's right, you don't need to shout, Izuku said softly, looking over his shoulder at his new friends. He offered a warm, reassuring smile. Never let anyone tell you your power is useless, Willow. Luz stared at Izuku, her heart doing a weird, fluttery flip. Okay, she thought, so he's not just a powerhouse. He's an actual, certified, heroic cinnamon roll. Alright, Captain Justice, Luz grinned, grabbing his sleeve again. Let's get to the library before you accidentally inspire the whole school to start a revolution. Their path to the library unfortunately took them directly past the gymnasium. As they walked past the open double doors, Luz slowed down, unable to resist a peek. Oh hey, it's the Abomination Track's midterm demonstration. Amity's class. Izuku paused, his curiosity getting the better of him. He peeked through the doors. The gym was massive, with bleachers filled with students and teachers. In the center of the room, standing in a large sparring ring, was Amity Blight. She was currently locked in intense concentration, drawing a massive purple spell circle in the air. From the floor, a towering, hulking monster made of thick, purple sludge rose up. It was easily 10 feet tall, groaning with a hollow, terrifying sound. Incredible, Izuku whispered, pulling his notebook out of his pocket. Spontaneous matter creation? Or is she summoning it from a pocket dimension? The viscosity of the slime looks highly resistant to blunt force trauma. It's an abomination, Luz whispered back. They're basically mindless golems made of magic mud. The witches control them with verbal commands. Abomination, strike the target. Amity commanded, pointing at a wooden dummy on the other side of the ring. The sludge monster raised a massive, gooey fist and slammed it down, obliterating the dummy into splinters. The teachers in the stands clapped approvingly. Amity smirked, but she looked exhausted. Sweat beaded on her forehead. She's pushing too hard, Izuku muttered, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed her stance. Her breathing is ragged. She's pouring too much energy into the construct to show off. The structural integrity of the golem is fluctuating. And then, disaster struck. Another student in the ring, a nervous-looking boy with messy hair, was trying to summon his own abomination. But his spell circle wavered. The magic sparked violently, releasing a concussive blast of raw magical feedback that slammed directly into Amity's abomination. The disruption to the magical frequency was catastrophic. Amity's abomination shrieked, its glowing eyes turning a violently bright, unstable red. Its form began to expand rapidly, the purple sludge bubbling and hissing with acidic heat. Control your construct, Miss Blight. The instructor yelled, stepping back in alarm. I'm trying. Amity gritted her teeth, desperately drawing containment circles, but the magic shattered like glass. It's not responding. The abomination went berserk. It swung a massive arm, backhanding Amity across the ring. She crashed into the wall with a painful thud, her staff clattering away. The monster turned its sights on the terrified, messy-haired boy who had caused the disruption. It raised both of its massive fists, ready to crush him. Danger sense, critical. A sharp, stabbing pain erupted at the base of Izuku's skull. The world seemed to slow down. He didn't think about his disguise. He didn't think about interdimensional politics. He saw a civilian in danger. Izuku, wait! Luz gasped, but her hand grasped empty air. Izuku was gone. Green lightning exploded in the doorway. With a burst of 15% one for all, Izuku shattered the stone tiles beneath his boots, launching himself into the gymnasium like a railgun projectile. He cleared the distance from the door to the center of the ring in a fraction of a second, his gray cloak billowing behind him like a storm cloud. He landed squarely between the berserk abomination and the cowering boy. The entire gymnasium gasped. Amity, clutching her bruised shoulder, stared in shock at the cloaked figure who had just materialized out of thin air. The abomination roared, bringing its massive, acidic fists down toward Izuku to crush him into a paste. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't draw a spell circle. He simply raised his right hand, pulling his middle finger back against his thumb. The familiar, comforting red lines of power illuminated beneath his skin, glowing brightly through the fabric of his white gloves. He channeled 20% of his power into that single digit, Delaware Smash. Izuku flicked his finger. The physical mechanics of the Delaware Smash were simple, yet devastating. By rapidly displacing the air molecules in front of his finger at supersonic speeds, Izuku created a localized, hyper-compressed bullet of wind pressure. Boom! A deafening shockwave erupted from Izuku's hand. The sheer, concussive force of the wind tore through the gymnasium like a hurricane. The blast hit the abomination point-blank in its massive chest. Because the abomination was made of highly viscous, magic-infused sludge, it was highly resistant to blunt force punches. But it had zero defense against a penetrating wave of pure, localized atmospheric pressure. The wind didn't just push the abomination back. It atomized it. The 10-foot-tall sludge monster exploded outward, its body violently dispersing into a million tiny droplets of harmless purple rain that splattered against the far wall of the gymnasium. The shockwave continued past the monster, cracking the stone wall behind it, and sending a powerful gust of wind through the bleachers, blowing the teachers' hats off and forcing the students to cover their eyes. Then, absolute, pin-drop silence fell over the gym. Izuku stood in the center of the ring, steam rising from his right hand. The green lightning faded from his body. He slowly lowered his arm, looking over his shoulder at the terrified boy on the ground. "Are you hurt?" Izuku asked gently, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. The boy shook his head rapidly, utterly paralyzed by shock. In the stands, the teachers were frozen. Principal Bump, who had been watching from the top row, gripped his clipboard so tightly the wood snapped. What manner of magic was that?" Bump whispered. "No circle. No incantation. Just raw, physical devastation." Amity slowly pushed herself up from the floor, her golden eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the back of the cloaked boy. He didn't use a spell, she thought, her mind racing. He just flicked his finger. Who is he? Izuku suddenly realized how quiet the room was. He looked up at the bleachers. Hundreds of eyes were staring at him. He had just used a highly destructive quirk in a world where he was supposed to be hiding. "Oh no," Izuku muttered, his cheeks burning red beneath his hood. Suddenly a hand clamped onto his wrist. Luz had sprinted into the ring, her face pale. "You hero-obsessed maniac, you just blew our cover to the entire school!" Luz hissed, though there was a terrifyingly impressed grin on her face. "Run!" "Right." Izuku didn't hesitate. He grabbed Luz by the waist, apologizing profusely as he hoisted her over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. He flared one for all to 10% and bounded out of the gymnasium, leaving a trail of green sparks and cracked floor tiles in his wake. They were out the front doors and deep into the woods before the teachers even remembered how to speak. High in the rafters of the gymnasium, hidden in the shadows, a figure crouched in silence. He wore a pristine white cloak and a golden mask that resembled an owl. Hunter, the golden guard of the Emperor's Coven, stared at the spot where the green sparking boy had just stood. He reached up, pressing a hand to his mask. "Uncle," Hunter whispered into a communication crystal hidden in his collar. "I've found something at Heck's side." A wild witch. But he didn't use normal magic. It was something else, something incredibly powerful. The crystal hummed with a cold, static energy. Emperor Bellows's voice rasped through the gym. "Bring him to me, Hunter. Alive. Do not fail." "Understood," Hunter replied, his eyes narrowing beneath his mask. The hunt had begun. The throne room of Emperor Bellows was a place entirely devoid of warmth. It was a cavernous, echoing chamber constructed of jagged, obsidian-like stone and the massive, fossilized ribs of the Titan. but worse than the freezing ambient temperature was the suffocating, oppressive aura that bled from the man sitting upon the throne. Hunter knelt on the cold, polished floor, his head bowed perfectly, his golden owl mask resting securely over his face. He kept his breathing shallow and controlled. Showing weakness in this room was not an option. "You are certain of what you saw, Hunter?" Bellows's voice was a terrifying contradiction. It was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried a raspy, underlying resonance that made the hairs on the back of Hunter's neck stand up. "Yes, Emperor," Hunter replied, his voice slightly distorted by his mask. "I was observing the hex-side gymnasium from the rafters. The Wild Witch, Ida, and her human pet were present, accompanied by an unknown anomaly. The boy wore a gray cloak, but beneath it, there was a physical enhancement I have never witnessed. He generated no spell circle. I sensed no magic aura. But he produced a localized blast of wind pressure strong enough to vaporize a grade A abomination in a single blow." A heavy silence fell over the throne room. Behind Bellows, the massive, beating heart of the Titan pulsed in the darkness, a grotesque, rhythmic thudding that set the tempo for the entire castle. Bellows leaned forward, the glowing blue eyes of his horned mask narrowing. A localized blast of wind, generated entirely by physical force. "And you said his body emitted lightning?" "Green lightning, Uncle," Hunter confirmed, looking up slightly. "It crackled over his skin before he struck." According to the Coven scouts investigating the rumors from Bonesborough Market, a boy matching this description also overpowered a four-armed demon in hand-to-hand combat. Again, without a single drop of magic, Bellows slowly stood up, his towering, cloaked figure casting a long, ominous shadow over his nephew. He raised a hand, examining his own gaunt, cursed fingers. Fascinating. A being completely devoid of magic, yet brimming with a wellspring of raw, unadulterated life energy. Energy potent enough to warp the physical environment. If harnessed, such an anomaly could be the catalyst I require. The Titan's will is truly mysterious. Bellows stepped down from the dais, gliding silently across the floor until he stood directly in front of the kneeling boy. He placed a heavy, cold hand on Hunter's shoulder. Hunter flinched internally but held his posture rigid. "You are my golden guard, Hunter," Bellows said softly. "My most trusted instrument. The day of unity approaches, and we cannot have wild, uncontrollable variables wandering the aisles. I need this boy. I need his power. Bring him to me." "I won't fail you, Uncle," Hunter vowed, desperation bleeding into his tone. He needed to prove himself. He needed to show that despite his own humiliating lack of natural magic, he was worthy of the Emperor's bloodline. "I'll rip the boiling owls apart to find him." "See that you do," Bellows murmured, turning away. "Or I will have to find someone who can." The veiled threat struck Hunter like a physical blow. He bowed his head lower, gripping his artificial staff tightly. "By your will." Far from the sterile, terrifying halls of the Emperor's castle, the atmosphere was considerably more chaotic. "Are we there yet?" Ida groaned, using Albert to hack through a thick patch of glowing, violet ferns. "Because my boots are sinking into mud that smells suspiciously like goblin bile, and my patience is wearing thinner than my wallet." "Almost!" Luz chirped enthusiastically, marching at the front of the group with a hand-drawn map in her hand. "According to the incredibly vague, cryptically translated text I found in that dusty book we stole." "Borrowed indefinitely," Ida corrected. "Borrowed indefinitely from the library. The Eclipse Lake should be just over this ridge." Izuku Midoriya followed closely behind Luz, his eyes darting across the dense, crimson canopy of the forest. He had discarded the oversized, restrictive gray cloak, returning to his repaired, dark green hero costume. Ida had managed to patch up the tears using a strange, incredibly durable spider silk she had lying around the owl house. It wasn't Kevlar, but it held. He still wore his iron-soled boots and his reinforced gloves, though his cowl was pushed back, letting his messy green hair breathe. "Titan's blood," Izuku muttered, pulling out his bestiary notebook. He gracefully stepped over a root that tried to snap at his ankle. "You said it's a hyper-concentrated source of magic, capable of tearing holes between dimensions. Chemically speaking, it must possess an unstable, highly reactive atomic structure. If it functions as a bridge between parallel universes, it likely bends spacetime in a localized area, similar to the quirk of the villain who sent me here. But if it's a liquid, how do you contain it without it warping the container? Kid, if you don't stop talking so fast, my ears are going to detach themselves and run away, Ida sighed, though there was an affectionate smirk on her face. You don't overthink Titan's blood. You just find it, scoop it up in a jar made of witch glass, and sell half of it to the highest bidder before using the rest to power a portal. Sell it? Izuku gasped, his heroic sensibilities instantly offended. But Ida, if it's that dangerous, putting it on the black market could be catastrophic. A villain could use it to bypass secure locations. Villains? Oh, sweet, naive greenie. The only villain around here is Emperor Bellows, and he already taxes everything I own, Ida retorted. Luz looked over her shoulder, her smile softening as she saw the dark bags under Izuku's eyes. Despite his energetic muttering, she knew he was exhausted. The incident at Hex's side had shaken him deeply. Hey, Luz said softly, dropping back to walk beside him. Don't stress too much about the whole exploding the abomination thing. Bump is still trying to convince the school board it was a freak atmospheric pressure event. I'm sorry, Luz, Izuku said, staring down at his red-gloved hands. I broke my promise. I promised to keep a low profile. A hero is supposed to be disciplined, but when I saw that student in danger, my legs just moved on their own. I couldn't stop myself. And that, Luz said, gently poking him in the chest, is exactly why you're amazing. You don't think about the rules when someone is hurt. You just save them. That's what a real hero does. Besides, we're miles away from civilization now. No one is looking for us out here in the BZZZZT. A sharp, needle-like spike of pure agony erupted at the base of Izuku's skull. Danger sense. It was screaming. Izuku didn't think. The green lightning exploded around his body, illuminating the dark forest. Get down! He threw his arms out, violently shoving Luz and Ida to the damp forest floor. A split second later, a blinding flash of yellow magic tore through the exact space where their heads had just been. The blast impacted a massive, petrified tree behind them, detonating with the force of a bomb. Wood and stone shrapnel rained down as the tree splintered, the concussive force rattling Izuku's teeth. What in the Titan's name? Ida snarled, rolling to her feet and instantly summoning Albert. She drew a massive, glowing orange spell circle, manifesting a dome of fire around them. Izuku stood up, pushing one for all to 8%. His eyes locked onto the clearing ahead. The smoke from the explosion cleared, revealing a figure standing on a rocky outcropping. He wore a pristine white cloak adorned with a golden triangle, dark boots, and a haunting, golden owl mask. He gripped a mechanical staff that hummed with a synthetic, dangerous energy. The Golden Guard, Ida hissed, her golden eyes narrowing. Bellows's personal lapdog. What are you doing out here, brat? Finally decided to try and arrest me yourself? The Golden Guard didn't look at Ida. His masked gaze was locked entirely onto Izuku. The owl lady is secondary, Hunter's distorted voice echoed across the clearing. He pointed his staff directly at Izuku's chest. I am here for the anomaly. By order of the Emperor, you are to come with me. Surrender peacefully, and I won't have to break your legs. Izuku stepped out of Ida's fire dome, placing himself squarely between the Golden Guard and his friends. He dropped into his combat stance, his fists raised, the green lightning sparking aggressively off his skin. I don't know who this Emperor is, Izuku said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the hardened, unyielding tone of a seasoned pro-hero. But I have no intention of going anywhere with you. If you want to hurt my friends, you'll have to go through me. Beneath the mask, Hunter gritted his teeth. Cocky. Have it your way. Hunter vanished. He didn't run. He simply ceased to be there. A faint yellow trail of light was the only indication of his movement. Teleportation? No, high-speed dash magic. Izuku's mind raced. Danger sense flared from behind him. Izuku ducked. Hunter materialized right behind him, swinging the heavy metal staff in a brutal, sweeping arc aimed at Izuku's head. The staff whistled through the air, clipping the tips of Izuku's green hair as he evaded. Too slow! Hunter taunted, spinning the staff and thrusting it forward, firing a point-blank blast of yellow energy. Izuku didn't retreat. He pivoted on his heel, channeling 10% of his power into his right leg. Shoot style. Izuku launched a devastating roundhouse kick, his iron-soled boot colliding directly with the blast of magic. The sheer kinetic force of the kick shattered the spell, dispersing the yellow energy into harmless sparks. Hunter's eyes widened behind his mask as the boy's momentum continued, forcing him to bring his staff up to block the remainder of the kick. Clang! The impact rang like a massive bell. Hunter was sent skidding backward across the dirt, his boots digging deep trenches into the soil. His arms trembled from the sheer physical weight of the blow. What is this kid? Hunter thought, panic and adrenaline spiking in his chest. No magic. Just pure physical force. It's like fighting a boulder. Izuku, be careful. Luz yelled from behind Ida's shield. He's the head of the Emperor's Coven. He's ruthless. I've fought ruthless before, Izuku muttered, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the Golden Guard. Hunter didn't give him time to think. He dashed again, zipping across the clearing in a zigzag pattern, leaving a trail of blinding yellow light. He appeared on Izuku's left, firing 3 rapid magic blasts. Izuku bounded off the trunk of a tree, ricocheting through the air like a pinball to dodge the projectiles. As Izuku flipped through the air, his hyper-observant eyes locked onto Hunter's movements. He's fast. Incredibly fast, Izuku analyzed, landing gracefully on a branch before immediately leaping away as Hunter blew the branch to splinters. But his form is rigid. He's overcompensating. And the magic, it's not coming from him. It's all coming from the staff. I don't sense the same organic flow of energy I see when Ida or Willow cast spells. Hunter dashed into the air, meeting Izuku in the sky. He swung his staff down in an overhead strike. Izuku countered, bringing both his forearms up in an X-block. The staff slammed into his reinforced bracers. They hung in midair for a split second, locked in a struggle of strength. It was in that proximity that Izuku saw it. Through the eyeholes of the golden mask, Izuku saw Hunter's eyes. They weren't the cold, calculating eyes of a seasoned, confident assassin. They were wide. They were desperate. The boy's breathing was erratic, his muscles straining past their safe limits. Izuku knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror every day during his first year at UA, when he was breaking his own bones just to prove he was worthy of All Might's quirk. And he had seen it in the sports festival, looking across the arena at Shoto Todoroki, a boy suffocating under the crushing weight of an abusive father's legacy. He's terrified, Izuku realized, his heart clenching. He's not fighting out of malice. He's fighting because he feels like he has to. He's fighting to prove his worth. Gravity took hold, and they both fell back to the dirt. They landed perfectly, sliding apart. Is that all you've got, Anomaly? Hunter shouted, though his voice cracked slightly with exertion. He gripped his staff with both hands, the mechanical crystal at the top glowing with an unstable, blinding intensity. I won't let you make a fool out of me. I am the Golden Guard. I am the Emperor's chosen. You're relying too much on your weapon. Izuku shouted back, standing tall. He didn't drop into an aggressive stance. He lowered his fist slightly, his green eyes softening with profound empathy. You're throwing everything you have into offense, neglecting your defense. You're fighting like your life is forfeit if you lose. Hunter froze for a microsecond, the words hitting him with the force of a physical blow. How does he know? Shut up! Hunter roared, his composure shattering. He thrust his staff into the ground. A massive, localized earthquake shook the forest. The dirt beneath Izuku's feet erupted, jagged spikes of earth shooting upward to impale him. Izuku jumped, but Hunter was already predicting the evasion. Using his dash magic, Hunter teleported directly above Izuku in midair, charging a massive, point-blank blast of yellow magic meant to incinerate the boy from above. Izuku! Ida screamed, preparing to drop her shield and intervene. But Izuku didn't need saving. He's desperate. If I hit him with a smash now, I might kill him, Izuku calculated in a fraction of a second. I have to subdue him. No blunt force. Pure control. Izuku took a deep breath, accessing the deeper core of One for All. He bypassed the raw kinetic energy of the first user, reaching out to the vestige of Daigoro Banjo. Black Whip, dark, shadowy energy, crackling with crimson and green lightning, erupted from Izuku's right shoulder. But unlike his early days of using the quirk, It wasn't a wild, thrashing monster. It was an extension of his own will. 6 thick tendrils of black energy shot upward with blinding speed. 2 of the tendrils violently lashed out, wrapping securely around Hunter's artificial staff just a millimeter before it fired. Izuku yanked downward with 20% of his physical strength. The staff was ripped completely out of Hunter's grip. What? Hunter gasped, his hands suddenly empty. Without his staff, his levitation magic ceased. Hunter began to plummet toward the jagged earth spikes he had just created below. Panic seized him. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for a fatal impalement. Instead, he felt something wrapped securely around his waist. It was soft, yet impossibly strong. He snapped his eyes open. Izuku had used 3 of the remaining black whip tendrils to catch Hunter in midair, suspending him safely a few feet above the deadly spikes. Using the final tendril, Izuku swung himself over to a safe patch of ground, gently lowering Hunter down beside him. Hunter stumbled, falling onto his hands and knees in the dirt. He was hyperventilating, his mind completely unable to process what had just happened. The boy with no magic had just produced shadow tendrils out of thin air. He had disarmed him in a fraction of a second. He had won. Hunter closed his eyes tightly, bracing himself. He had failed the Emperor. He had lost his weapon. This boy was going to kill him. Are you hurt? Hunter flinched. He looked up. Izuku Midoriya was kneeling on the dirt in front of him. The terrifying green lightning and the dark shadows were completely gone. Izuku wasn't looking at him with anger, triumph, or malice. He was holding out a hand, his face etched with genuine, profound concern. That was a dangerous move you tried back there, Izuku said softly, his voice completely devoid of hostility. You pushed too much energy into a single attack. If your staff had overloaded, it would have exploded in your hands. You could have been seriously injured. Hunter stared at the outstretched, gloved hand. He was paralyzed. Why? He stammered, his voice trembling beneath his mask. I was trying to capture you. I attacked your friends. Why are you offering me a hand? Izuku's expression softened even further. He saw right through the mask. He saw the scared, pressured kid underneath. Because you didn't want to fight, Izuku said, his voice barely above a whisper. Your eyes, they looked like they were screaming for help. You fight like someone who has been told his entire life that he's only worth what he can destroy. But you're wrong. Hunter's breath hitched. A painful, suffocating lump formed in his throat. No one had ever spoken to him like this. Emperor Bellows only spoke of duty, sacrifice, and the Titan's will. Kikimora only spoke with venom. The other scouts feared him. But this boy, this incredibly powerful, terrifying anomaly, was looking at him with pity. No, not pity. Empathy. You don't know anything about me. Hunter snapped, aggressively swatting Izuku's hand away. He scrambled backward in the dirt, his pride wounded, his worldview actively fracturing. I am the Golden Guard. I have a duty. Duty shouldn't require you to throw your life away, Izuku replied firmly, rising to his feet. He picked up Hunter's staff from the ground, holding it out to him. A real hero doesn't make people suffer to achieve peace. If your emperor demands that you break yourself to serve him, then he doesn't deserve your loyalty. Hunter snatched the staff from Izuku's hands, his fingers trembling. He wanted to raise it. He wanted to blast this preachy, impossible boy into dust, but his arms wouldn't move. The fight had completely drained out of him, replaced by a terrifying, swirling storm of doubt. Izuku! Get away from him! Luz shouted, running out from behind the fire shield with a fire glyph drawn and ready. Ida was right behind her, her staff glowing menacingly. Hunter looked at the wild witch, then at the human, and finally back at the anomaly. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and completely emotionally compromised. This isn't over, Hunter choked out, his voice wavering. He tapped his staff against the dirt, drawing a quick, sloppy teleportation circle. The Emperor will have you. You can't hide forever. The yellow light engulfed him, and with a sharp crack, the Golden Guard vanished from the forest, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and burnt pine. The forest fell silent, save for the crackle of Ida's fading fire dome. Izuku let out a long, shuddering sigh. The adrenaline left his system, and his muscles ached violently. Using Black Whip in this dimension felt heavier, as if the ambient magic of the boiling isles resisted his quirk's manifestation. Luz sprinted over to him, grabbing his shoulders and checking him over frantically for injuries. Izuku! Are you okay? Did he hit you? What was that black stuff? Was that another quirk? I'm fine, Luz, really, Izuku reassured her, offering a weak smile. And yes, it's part of my quirk. It's a bit complicated. Ida walked over, examining the massive trenches dug into the dirt and the splintered trees. She looked at Izuku, her expression a mix of awe and deep suspicion. Kid, I don't know what kind of steroids they feed teenagers in your dimension, Ida said, crossing her arms. But you just manhandled the Emperor's top enforcer without breaking a sweat. And then, when you had him dead to rights, you let him go. Why? Izuku looked down at his right hand. He clenched it into a fist. He's just a kid, Ida, Izuku said quietly. A kid trapped in a horrible situation, being manipulated by someone who claims to care about him. If I had crushed him, I'd be no better than the villains back home. Izuku looked up at the crimson sky, his resolve hardening into steel. I don't know who Emperor Bellows is, but if he treats his own people like disposable tools, I won't let him get away with it. Luz stared at Izuku, her heart swelling with an immense, uncontainable admiration. He wasn't just a comic book superhero. He was a genuine protector. Well, Ida sighed, running a hand through her wild gray hair. So much for keeping a low profile. You're officially at the top of the Emperor's hit list, Greenie. She smirked, clapping him firmly on the back. Welcome to the club. Now, let's go find that Titan's blood before more of Bellows's goons show up. As they resumed their trek into the woods, Izuku pulled his notebook out once more. But he didn't write about demon flora or the properties of magic. He sketched a golden owl mask. And beneath it, he wrote a single line, the Golden Guard. Strategy, do not defeat. Save him.